Hello, I'm David Kasnoff. People have long had a fascination with the vast African continent. Among them, Ernest Hemingway, Martha Gellhorn, and yes, even Kodak's founder, George Eastman. Liz Gilbert went to Kenya in 1991, and she's worked as a photographer in Africa, first as a photojournalist, and now as a chronicler of African heritage in two powerful books of photography, Broken Spears and the recent tribes of the Great Rift Valley. In today's Kodak Close-Up, Gilbert describes her passion for photography, meeting the remarkable people and places in the cradle of civilization, and the risks that she takes to capture her amazing photographs. So here now, a Kodak Close-Up with Liz Gilbert.
My subject matter is about tradition and culture. And that's something that's rapidly changing in Africa. So more and more, as I go traveling and photographing, I see admissions to modernity in places that I'm taking pictures of. And what I'd like to present to the viewer is a connection with the people I'm photographing without the distraction of things that you would see in color. I mean, you know, I want the viewer to have a very direct experience with what I'm photographing. And as much as I can omit debris in the images that would be more obvious in color, I try to do that. And because it's traditional, I want to use, in keeping with that idea, I want to use a traditional process, and I want to use, you know, traditional films and papers for as long as I can. It has to do with lighting and where I am in heat and what I happen to have packed on the trip, I think. You know, portraits and things, I tend to go for the T-Max. More of my outdoor stuff, more ceremonial things, events, I tend to go with the Tri-X. There's a lot to love about that place. I don't think I'm unique in being drawn to it. There's so many people, you know, artists and writers and journalists. I mean, there's a big draw. Africa's travelers. I mean, safari business is huge. There's a big draw to Africa. My parents made me go when I was a teenager. Oh, really? And I was on a school program, and just kind of got the bug. I loved it. I was 18. I kept thinking I would go back. And you know, your life is what you project it to be. If you imagine, you know, that was in my thoughts throughout college, and as soon as I got out of college, I sort of found myself in a situation where I met someone who lived there, and they invited me to come out, and the portal was opened. This book is about a huge geography. It spans 3,500 miles. It documents 25 tribes. It was a 2.5-year journey. It's, in scope, it's much bigger, and also I think the feeling of it, I mean, you know, it has a much broader, epic feeling to it. I mean, I've taken the work out of the studio. It's not confined anymore. That's what I mean when I say epic. It's just the scale of the territory is immense. The diverse range of people is, I mean, they're all so different. You're looking at 25 different cultures, all of them, you know, really, really different. You've got desert nomads in the Horn of Africa on their camels, and you've got mask dancing in Malawi and ancestor worship, and you've got, in the middle, you've got people painted like guinea fowls in southern Ethiopia. I mean, it's just, the range is what is so big about the project. It's a bigger book. I love to try and be and have an African experience when I'm working in Africa. I go local, as they say. I sleep in a tent, or I stay in the small local hotels that are favored by the local people. I don't stay in Sheratons. I try to not separate myself as much as possible. And I eat in roadside restaurants. I travel with, I usually identify someone to be my translator, and then I have that person travel with me. And oftentimes they're a driver. If I'm not driving myself with my own car, then I'll hire a driver who's my translator. So I always have a companion with me, a local companion with me, someone who can, you know, sort of show me, especially with this latest project, Tribes of the Great Rift Valley, I was trying to photograph a big territory. So I really needed assistance from a number of different people. I couldn't rely on one translator or one person to guide me through the whole experience. I just saw so many amazing things. You know, it was all, it would be hard to identify one thing that was more extraordinary to me than another, but memorable things might have been, I got attacked once in a village. That was memorable, and that kind of stands out in my mind as one of the more dangerous moments of the trip. And I found myself in a flood in the Danakil Desert, which is a depression, and it gets only a few inches of rainfall per year. And it happened, and it's the hottest, they say it's the hottest place on earth. I mean, temperatures can get up to 130 degrees in the daytime. People actually can't live there certain times of year because you can die actually living in that kind of heat. And when I got there, I found it started to drizzle, and it is a basin. You know, it's 500 feet below sea level. So as this water started coming in, it completely flooded this village I was in, and all I had was my tent, and I was actually at that time sleeping in a hut with the local people, and our whole hut was flooded, and we couldn't get in the car because of some electrical problem. My driver tried to get in the car, and blue flame shot out of his arm, and he catapulted himself into the air, and we thought he was dead. He was electrocuted. And this happened to everyone that touched something metal in the village. There was another guy that had a generator, and it was just and 400 head of cattle were killed. They were washed away in this incredible flood, and so I thought that was nature-wise the most incredible experience of my life, actually being in that natural environment, right in the middle of a storm with no shelter, no buildings like we know them. It's one thing to be in a storm in an apartment in New York City, but a completely other thing to be on the ground just with nowhere to, you can't run. This is really interesting. We all have a connection to this continent, really. I mean, if what they say is true, and DNA evidence suggests, you know, that we all are connected to Africa historically, genetically. You know, there's something, even if we're very far removed from the continent, there's something that I think resonates in us, all of us as human beings. It's, you know, you see those 3 or 4 million year old footprints at Laetoli in Tanzania, and you think about our origins and where we've come from, and this is something that everyone can connect with and grasp. Africa's just a great place. People are friendly. People are, it's very different from our own culture. It's beautiful. The land is immense. It's got a lot going for it. There's a lot of opportunity there. A lot of lovely people, and I always think its greatest asset is the friendliness of its people. It's been my experience. I haven't been all over the continent, but certainly in East Africa and definitely in Kenya. You know, one of the things visitors leave with is this wonderful feeling about the people that they met. I try to edit as I go along. You know, it's a 2 or 3 year process, so, you know, I'm always processing after a shoot, editing, putting that away, doing my digital stuff as much as I can, just keeping up with the archiving. And you go back once you've reacted to it and once you've edited the first time around, it makes it a lot easier when you're, you know, you've already got your edit. And if there's something you want to explore, you can go back to that file. But I tried. A lot of the book was edited along the way. But there was definitely there was a period where I gave it up. I gave up news magazine work and completely focused on the stuff that I'm doing now. Yes, I still call myself a photojournalist, and my roots are in photojournalism. And my projects are photojournalism. They are reportage. They are, you know, documentary pieces of realities, and so and they involve a lot of research. And even though I'm not working any longer in magazines and newspaper business, I'm still thinking that, you know, my work is another version of that. Digital has its convenience. I mean, it's appropriate to use it for me when it's convenient to use it for me, and it gives you something that film doesn't. I mean, I use both now. About a third of my book is actually digital, and the rest of it is the film. And film is increasingly more difficult to work with. You know, it's passion to continue working with film. You don't get the instant gratification of digital. But you know, for things, ceremonies and things like that, that's something that I would maybe turn to digital for, rather than the big, heavy, cumbersome Pentax medium format camera. Kodak has sponsored my work for 7 years. They've given me all my film and processing, and you know, with film being as expensive it is, and with my work being as uncommercial as it is, it's a huge advantage to have that kind of sponsorship, financially as well. I mean, you know, knowing that all the film, it's a bit like being a painter and someone gives you free paint and canvas and says do anything you want. I mean, it's a kind of freedom. It makes everything possible, to be honest with you. I'm not sure I would have done the projects if I didn't have that sponsorship, because it's a huge thing to look at an idea that big in scope and not know how you're going to finance it. And it begins with the knowledge that I have this profound, you know, opportunity in my sponsorship. It begins with that. Oh, I know I've got this. I know I've got this. So I begin here. It's the platform from which everything else, and for me over the years, has been launched. Photograph what you like and photograph what interests you. Photograph what impresses you. You know, and I think that, you know, when people are passionate about something or excited about something or impressed by something, you know, these reactions that cause us to pick up the camera, I mean, that's your instinct, really. It begins with your instinct, and, you know, admiring that weather pattern on the horizon and thinking, wow, look at that, you know, kind of follow your heart in a way.